Careful how you talk. Yeah, they Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Need to mute this. Okay, thank you, everybody.
At our Stone Lab seminar. We're glad that you could make it.
That's going to be bothersome. Let's see if that works. Yay. All right.
Thank you.
For those of you online, we have 4 or 5 folks online joining us for our Stone Lab seminar series this Thursday. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Dave McShaffrey from Marietta College here from here in Ohio. He's recently come out with a book published by the Ohio Biological Survey on the damselflies and dragonflies of Ohio. It's a fantastic book. I have one of my own. So those of you that are naturalists that are interested in identifying those fun critters with really nothing more than a camera, if memory serves, it's a great book to have. So please look into that. But he's going to talk more than just about the book. He's going to talk about the Odonata of Ohio, those fascinating flyers. So without further ado, Dr. McShaffrey.
So I'm going to take off my hat from the second best field station, in the United States, and put on my dragonfly hat for this talk. I don't have a Stone Lab hat, but it's great to be back here. And I was thinking today, the more things change, the more they stay the same. The students were here in class on national holiday, right? You guys have no room to complain. On Saturday, the 4th of July, our ichthyology class was over at the city beach, seining for fish. We were catching toddlers. When we started catching brown trout, we were out of there. That was it. So anyway, it's really great to be back here. I tossed in a couple pictures here from, of course, technical glitches engaged now. Let's see.
Maybe because of the share,
Yeah.
maybe the down button.
I think it's just frozen.
You're
Right, sorry for the delay.
There we go. Okay.
So, yeah, I was here, it's a while ago. I'm looking at the pictures around here and it's kind of scary that I recognize or took classes with some of those people there. But you guys, this is the best place, I think, to do learning. I mean, you're like a pig in slop for 5 weeks or whatever, and just great stuff to do. Sitting out on the Adirondack chairs, great thing. Watching the boats run into the bar. I mean, you know, going out and doing a trawl, just out doing some fishing, limnology class, getting ready to go out on a cruise, and sampling out on the lake. My roommate, I spent summer up here with him. He was doing research on Plectonema woolli, which is a cyanobacteria that lives on the bottom of the lake. You can see our elaborate sampling equipment there. It was a brick wrapped with a screen attached to a rope. We also did a lot of diving that summer. It was our tanks were either on the compressors or on the bottom of the lake, it seemed. And of course, volleyball. And that summer we were lucky enough, the guy that played the lead in Blue Lagoon, he was up there that summer. I don't know if probably most of you missed that reference completely, but. And this was from University of Akron. This is our mascot, Dr. Limnos. And one of the things I learned up here is if you take those old style life jackets and you cinch them up real tight, if you're sitting in an overheating room listening to some old fart, you can fall asleep and not have your head go back or down. It'll hold you upright. Remember that. They used to be actually in the room here, so but I think they must have learned their lesson. But I'm here to talk about dragonflies, and I'm going to talk about 2 surveys that we did. We did one back in the 90s. There were about a dozen of us working on the project, and about 300 people volunteered. And we ended up, we looked at museum records as well as publications. We collected specimens, ended up with about 27,000 records. Again, it was old school, out actually catching the bugs and putting them in envelopes. I was talking to some of the people in the Invert lab. That's what you do with the dragonflies and damselflies. It's a lot easier than pinning them. But that's how we were doing that survey. We put it together into a book. There were 11 co-authors on the book. And this was old school entomology. It was dichotomous keys based on specimens that you had in hand, if not under a microscope. So it wasn't very good for out in the field. We had a couple pages of color plates, but you could not sit and picture key your way through this. The line drawings, for the most part, species descriptions were pretty good. A lot of natural history there. You can see the distribution, when they're flying, and all that kind of information. So that was kind of state of the art for a while. That came out in 2002. And about that time, a bunch of technologies started to pull together, in particular, digital photography, iNaturalist, and social media. And we were able to leverage those to a great extent when we did the next survey that came along after that. So also during that time, we had there were a couple field guides, actual field guides with color pictures to dragonflies, damselflies of Florida, and one for dragonflies, United States. They were good, but they weren't great, and they didn't come out till late in the survey. We were working with Dragonflies of North America, the 2nd edition. Actually, at Marietta, we had the 1st edition, and that was pretty much it. But those books on the top, if you're interested in dragonflies, damselflies, those are all excellent, particularly Ed Lamb's book, if you can find it. It's been out of print. We're trying to get him to put it back. We've got about 170 species of Oenata in Ohio. I say about because we've got some species that are difficult taxonomically to resolve. And we're also not sure what you do with things that are extirpated, that may be vagrants and things like that. But 170 is probably kind of the upper limit of what we have. So we started doing a second survey in 2017, again at the behest of Division of Wildlife. And we did this one a lot differently. We hired a coordinator, we used iNaturalist, and we used a lot of social networking to do this. So before 2015, that's what the observations of Odonata in the United States look like. We put Ohio on the map. Okay, this is after. I mean, you can see us from space now. We nailed that down. We had a little bit more use. There's still some areas in the state, either sparsely populated, mostly agricultural, or both. But we have more work to do, but we think we have a pretty good feel for what's in the state right now. As of earlier, a couple weeks ago, there were 250,000 observations from Ohio for Odonata. When we wrote the book, we were working with about 200,000. Those were new ones, and then the 27,000 that we had from the first survey. And there's 159 species, say 160 species. That's probably a better feel. These are things that have been seen in the last 10 years. So that's probably a better feel for what we have in the state. And to date, almost 5,800 people have contributed. And there's Jim Lemon down there, 23,000 observations on his own, and he's seen 145 species by himself. So we got the new field guide. We're kind of proud of it. I've worked on this with Melissa Spring, pass a copy around. Melissa Spring was a former student at Marietta College, and then Jim McCormick, a lot of you will know, a naturalist from the Columbus area. And so Melissa was the person we hired to do the survey as well. Almost 400 pages. The introduction has a ton of natural history in it. We have species keys, which are unique. It's a long story, but basically, at the end, we were challenged to come up with species keys, and we decided to do them based on field characters rather than in the hand characters. So the idea is if you have a good pair of close focusing binoculars or a good digital photograph, you should be able to use a dichotomous key to identify the specimens, as opposed to have to get out a microscope and all that kind of stuff. You can see the pages for the species. Pictures are on one side, the rest of the information is on the other. Lots of good natural history information there, as well as the normal distribution. The main hit on most of the field guides out there, particularly for Odonata, was that the pictures are always too small. We made them as big as possible, 2, maybe 3 per on a page, and they're big. They're usually larger than life size when you come right down to it. A woman named Jessie Smith, Ohio Biological Survey, did an incredible job of laying the book out. Came out about this time last year, shot to #1 on Amazon, and you can bet I grabbed those screenshots immediately. There's also the Ohio Odonata Society. You Google it, don't try to type that in, but we have a website. You can join the Ohio Odonata Society. That website has a ton of good information. Distribution data was obsolete the day the book was printed, but this is as up to date as it gets. This is accessible to the public, is what's on that website. Our newsletter is also published there, and it's a really nice publication. We got some really good people working on both the website and newsletter and the data on the back end. And if you really can't wait, there is a Facebook group. For most of you, talk to your parents. I'll show you Facebook. Odonata, Ohio, and this is where people post what they're finding, where they're finding it, that type of stuff. You can also get some help with identification. The AI on iNaturalist is crazy good at identifying dragonflies and damselflies. But if you get stuck, there'll be somebody like Jim Lemon who will look at, usually within a couple of days, you'll get an answer. Sometimes within 5 minutes, you'll get your observation confirmed, but you do need to flag it to the Ohio Odonata Survey Project. We'll eventually get it if you don't do that, but if you flag it there, it'll pop up on people's screens and they will jump on it pretty quickly. But you could also put it on Odonata, Ohio, and get some feedback there. So the way this all comes together, ODNR, they're responsible to the feds for keeping track of the flora and fauna in the state. DOW, they do the fauna part. I'm not really sure who does the flora part anymore, but in any event, Division of Wildlife, then when they need to do a survey, they will either contract with a biologist or they'll look up what you might call an affinity group, and we've worked with them twice now to put together surveys. At the other end of this is the Ohio Biological Survey, which is a private institution. It's started a little bit over 100 years ago as a consortium of schools, including Marietta College and Ohio State. Osborne back there was first director of it. And it was at Ohio State for a long time, but frankly, Ohio State, the dean got a little bit weird about what was science and what wasn't, and we came down on the what wasn't science, so we took our marbles and went private. We're kind of the publishing arm now, and so we publish a lot of these. Nobody gets rich on this. I don't see a dime. I have to buy the books myself, so you know it's not. Nobody's getting rich on this. Any money that the survey clears on this goes into other publications. Division Wildlife paid for the layout of the book. They paid Melissa's salary when she was doing the survey. They bought a big run of the books to get the printing costs down. So they helped out tremendously. But like I said, nobody's getting rich. Anything extra that the survey picks up goes to publishing, shall we say, less charismatic fauna. That's an excellent book, by the way. I may be the only person who's bought it off Amazon, but it is a very good book. And it is out there. But we've published a lot of stuff. We have very good calendar or catalog. Go to the Ohio Biological Survey website, and you can buy just about anything online or from Amazon. And I wanted to put in a plug for this book. A guy named Ed Lamb, traditionally trained artist, self-trained in Odonata. We've been bugging him for the last 20 years. He's been working on this book. It came out last summer. It is gorgeous. All of North America, the dragonflies. A good illustrator can look at 100 specimens and combine them into one drawing. And Ed is very, very good at that. The only complaint I have about his book is that his paintings are so big, take up so much room. He didn't have room for a lot of natural history information, but it's worth it just to look at the drawings. It's an incredible book. Okay, so now we're going to change things up a little bit. And this is my trigger warning here. There is Latin ahead, okay? And before anybody starts to complain about the Latin, I have a quick test for you. What are the common names of these two organisms? When you were 7 years old, you were tossing around scientific names without the slightest bit of difficulty. And then sometime in your 20s, you go, oh man, scientific names, why do we have to know this? And yeah, release your inner 7-year-old. Okay, distribution of things in Ohio. You know, of course, when we do, it's going to take a couple minutes here for me to go through the physiographic regions so you can understand that, forget it. Dragonflies, pay no attention to that drawing. They depend on where the larvae are. The larvae depend on current speed and or plants, and they don't depend on particular plants. If it's a plant, that's good enough for them. They are all carnivorous. There are not too many orders of insects that you can use the word all in any kind of the part of the description. They are all carnivorous, both in the adult and the larval stage. So if the larvae find the right current speed, which means the right substrate, they're happy, the adults will be up ahead. And if it's very slow current, then you have vegetation, emergent vegetation, and others are happy there. So I'll start off with this one. This is the charismatic one, Anax junius, the common green darner. The male's translucent green thorax, bright blue on the abdomen. It's a big beast. When it flies around, you notice it. One of the first ones we see in the spring. They migrate up from the south on storm fronts, show up here about March. They will lay eggs. Those eggs are feeding as larvae now. By fall, they will emerge as adults, fly back south. And then their offspring, that when they get down to the south, will be the ones to come up here next spring. We also have a resident population who are just big larvae right now, and they are going to emerge over the course of the summer. They will lay eggs, which won't develop, won't turn into adults until next summer. So here is the female. She is laying eggs in the plant there. The males may stay near the female, make sure no other males come in. They may hold on to the female, as you see here, or they may just, after they mate, just let go. Now, male dragonflies have an interesting problem. The opening to the genital system is at the tip of the abdomen. That's also where he grabs the female. It is going to do him no good at all to smear sperm all over the back of her head. Okay, that doesn't work. Okay, life might find a way, but life's not going to find a way through that. So before he mates, he bends his abdomen forward and deposits the sperm in a pocket on the underside of his abdomen. After he grabs a female, and she doesn't get much choice in this as far as the grabbing part, but as far as the mating goes, if she decides that this is mate worthy, she will swing her abdomen up and pick up that sperm. Okay, how that evolved is something that keeps Charles Darwin up at night. I mean, you know. This is the face, and I'm going to be mentioning a lot of field ID characters. That bullseye on the top of the fronds there, that bullseye tells you it's Anax junius. It's diagnostic for the entire, well, for the eastern United States. You can see the scratches on her eye. That's where she's been grabbed by a male. That part probably isn't very pleasant. They can change color. And this is really neat. I took one, stuck it in a refrigerator overnight, brought it out in the morning, put it under an incandescent light. Those are those ones that get hot, okay? Not LED lights. And as it got warmer, it went from purple to blue, okay? And then after it got blue, I turned off the light. Those are the blue numbers there, and it goes back to purple. It took a couple hours to do that. In nature, this happens within minutes. At night, they will land in vegetation. One of the places I see them land a lot is in dogbane, which has purple stems. They'll hold on to the stems and they'll face to the east. In the morning, when the sun hits them, within 5 minutes or so, they warm up and they're ready to fly. You do not want to be an immobile, large, bright blue insect when the early morning birds are out, okay? You want to blend into the background until you warm up. And once they warm up, they're agile enough to escape most birds. The larvae, I should really do this whole talk reverse because the larvae are where the action's at. They can live for a couple of years in some situations, molt 20 or 30 times sometimes. They, you know, this is Anax junius again. It's a big larva. It's when it's fully grown. They can eat fish, tadpoles, things like that. A lot of other dragonflies. You got to be impressed by an organism that can fill its abdomen up with water, squirt water out its butt, swim by jet propulsion. Okay, that's an impressive trick. And I've seen them in ponds without fish, just swimming along as if they're minnows out in the middle of the pond. They have underneath their head a structure called the labium, which they use to capture prey. I'll show you that in a minute. It's right above that blue line that you see there. This species is a visual predator. Not all of them are when they're nymphs. Large eyes, they find their prey, they clamber about in vegetation. They prefer a fishless pond, but if there's enough vegetation in the pond, they'll be in the part where they can get away from the other predators. And again, they will eat anything. Normally, I would be scared for that other dragonfly there, but as I put this talk together, the more I look at that thing, I'm starting to see a spider there. I'm wondering if this is mimicry, underwater mimicry, to kind of hold the Anax at bay. I don't know. You guys see the fangs there on that other dragonfly? So I don't know. I have to study that. Here's how that labium works. This is a different species. Normally it's folded up underneath because otherwise it'd be in the way. Spans out, reaches pretty good reach. There's big teeth on the end. Grab the prey, haul it back. And then there's other little mouth parts that are ready to tear into it. The extension is hydraulic, supposedly one of the fastest movements in the animal kingdom, but there's a lot of things that claim to be. The retraction is by muscles. Other species have a labium that's more spoon-shaped, little hairs on the top of it. These would be the things that are scooping up mosquito wrigglers or tumblers or Daphnia or something like that. And again, bringing them back to the mouth and chowing down. All Odonata have to go on shore to emerge. They can't just do it from the surface of the water like mayflies and midges and things like that. They will leave the water, sometimes going a substantial distance, anchor themselves, The skin splits along the back. They wiggle their way out. They leave the lining of their trachea behind, which is incredible too. And then they start swallowing air and pumping up their wings. Now they do this at night because it's going to take a couple hours for the wings to harden. If they're lucky by morning, they can fly rather weakly into some bushes and hide there for a day or two until the wings really harden. Until the wings are really hard, they are easy pickings for birds. And when you have an emergence of these things in the morning, the birds are usually all through the bushes looking for them. Our other anax in Ohio is Longippes, the comet darner. Again, big insect, only this time bright red abdomen. Really cool to see. And again, the mouth parts on these guys, like every mouth part, it has teeth. There's no soft mouth parts there. They are ready to chomp in the chitin and dismember anything that they catch. This is the female. Females tend to have stockier abdomen because it takes a lot more room for eggs as opposed to sperm. They also tend to be a little bit less brightly colored, probably like similar to ducks, for instance, where the males are more colored because frankly, males aren't that important in terms of evolution. So you can, as long as they reproduce once, you can get rid of them. The females need to stay alive to get those eggs out. When you get really good at catching, people ask me, how do you catch these things? Well, I normally use a net or some, but with a little bit of practice, all you need to do is carry your brooder with you and just whip it out and you can snag them. Okay. It does take a little practice, but this is swamp darner, and she is laying her egg with her ovipositor there. She's slicing into that wood, rotting wood. When she's in a swamp, when the water levels rise, the larvae will wiggle out, develop in the swamp. These are ones that take a little bit longer to develop because if the swamp dries up, they dig down into the muck and, will spend part of the summer in there. You guys are all experienced biologists. You can clearly see the gray petal tail there. This is probably the most ancestral of the dragonflies. You could go back, you can go back 10,000 years and you could probably, if you found one of these things, found one of them back 10,000 years ago, you could compare it to the modern one, not see much different. Almost all the characters are ancestral compared to what we see in the other ones. It's an interesting bug in that they're big, they like to land on people. So if you go down the Cedar Bog, for instance, and you're on the boardwalk there, particularly with a group of people, chances are they will land on somebody in a group. A remarkable number of pictures on iNaturalist show these things purchased on cloth, somebody's arm or, back of their head or whatever. I took these pictures in North Carolina, and ours around here are a little bit more gray. I need to look into that more. It might be that these are just more recently emerged and they look more brown at that point. Now, I put these guys in primarily because I love to say Didymops. It's the best generic name ever, Didymops. It sounds like a 60s song. The male, again, is in the front holding on to the female. Here are the females where she's bending her abdomen forward and picking up the sperm. Now, the problem with scientific names is scientists being scientists, they can never leave them alone. And so they changed the best generic name and they put it in with the boring old name for pretty much the rest of the family. The Macromyidae, these are the cruisers. They're big, they're fast, huge green eyes, all of them except for former Didymops, and then black and yellow abdomens, very fast flyers, really, really cool insects. Move on into the club tails, and I realized as I talk together, most of mine don't have really club tails, the ones I'm showing you. But at the end of the abdomen, those bright yellow claspers are a clue that you are in the genus Aurogonphus. But this particular species here has, again, a diagnostic character that you could see with binoculars or in a good picture. If you look at the back of the head or from the front, there's a little point there. You see that point, you know you have a unicorn club tail, okay? So again, that's the thing that a guy named Larry Roche started to mess around with, and he realized, yeah, you can identify these things from field characteristics. Again, close focusing binoculars or a digital photograph. You could do it. Here's another one. This is a genus that has a field mark that is very obvious. This is female again. If you look on the hind legs, there are 2 rows of spines there, one set bigger, the other smaller. That tells you you're looking at a spiny legs in the genus Dromaeogonthus. The other neat little character there, this is one that I like, is a spaceman on the back. So the spaceman is going through little turnstiles there, coming off his ship. Those 2 things, these guys, when you see them, you think that there's something else, something that's more exciting. You know, it's like you would, if you're a birder, you know, if it's like as if robins look like something more exciting, and you see them and then you realize, oh, it's just another robin. Okay, you see the spines? Now you know what to look for. Right there they are. We have 2 species in Ohio. You can separate them easily by color. Again, spines. And, you know, once you see the spines, you have it to genus. And then the color is so obvious between the 2. This is a happy story. Okay, this is the Plains clubtail. When we did our first survey, we couldn't find many of these. When we talked to DNR, we said, you know, you got to put these on the endangered species list. So they went on the endangered species list. 20 years later, when we're doing the second survey, a group of us started working the Tuscarawas River, and we started finding these all over the place. What was the difference? Ohio EPA in 20 years did a really good job of cleaning up our streams. They've been doing that for quite a while, and they're getting better and better. Number 2, ODNR and its myriad divisions has done a really good job of getting better river access. So you can get in and look for these things. And I also want to point out Stark Parks. They have this wonderful towpath trail that runs the length of the county. Gave us a lot better access to places on there. And like I said, once we got in there, we could find them. We know what the habitat looks like. We were finding them on tributaries. After the survey, we went back to the state and said, hey, pull them off. And so they did. They're not on the endangered list anymore. I don't know about that fly. Field character for this was a tough one. There's a lot of these things that look very similar. This is a tough one, but what has been working for me is if you look on the underside of the 2nd and 3rd abdominal segments, the forward one, the 2nd segment is kind of yellow, and the one behind it is white or cream colored. Closely related species, Gomphoros fraternus, they're both kind of yellow or cream, but they're not different colored. Otherwise, it can look very different. I know these 2 particular individuals, the color was also very different, but they have a wide range of color on these 2. In terms of mass, this is the biggest one. This is the dragon hunter, Agenius brevistalis. This is a female again. Now I want to do a poll here. Does anybody, when they look at this thing, do you see like Aladdin's genie, the animated version in it? Beauty and the Beast. Do you see it? The big body and the small head. I got some people nodding their heads. Melissa would not let me put that in there. She said nobody will get it. And I thought, it's pretty obvious, but okay. So maybe it wasn't the best character. But again, these guys are big, as the name implies. They will eat other dragonflies of just about any size. They'll eat butterflies. They will eat moths. They will take a close look at a hummingbird. This is the male. And again, they're flying now. They're pretty impressive insects, particularly on the wing. This is a famous one, Viridifrons there. That literally means green face. You know, the Latin does help sometimes. I have no idea what Hylogonthus means, but Viridifrons means green face. And so this particular individual is probably the most, more people have seen a picture of this individual than any other of its species. And the reason I say that was when we were putting the book together, I needed to find a picture of a female. I could not find a good one on iNaturalist. And so I figured, well, I'll go to the field guides. One of the field guides will have it in there, and whoever it is, I probably know them. I'll call them up and see if I can use the picture. So Dennis Paulson's Dragonflies and Damselflies of the East. I thought, okay, if it's in here, I know Dennis will help me out. And I looked in the book, and sure enough, there's a picture of the green face clubtail. And I thought, oh, wonderful, John Pagajnik. He'll give me a copy of that picture. I'm sure of that. 2004, Ashtabula County. And I looked at that a little more closely. I said, I know that bug. I was there when he photographed the other one. And so, or photographed it, and I photographed the same insect. but John's picture has been like in 5 or 6 different field guides. And so we didn't want to use that picture again. My picture isn't quite as good, but we figure will be a little bit different. So if you've used a field guide to dragonflies, you probably have seen John's picture of that particular individual. Rare, very rare in Ohio, and not real common elsewhere. Toss this little guy in, one of my favorites. It's a tiny little clubtail, that big maybe. It flitters around just about ankle height where sun's reflecting off the water. I call it the rascal, the riffle. Alba stylus means white tail, okay? I have one state record to my name, and that's this one here. After one of our Odonata Society meetings, we were at a small pond, saw this dark dragonfly flying around, couldn't figure out what it was. Melissa saw him, she caught one. I photographed one. We got home, looked it up. We both emailed each other about the same time. It's a double ring pennant, new to Ohio. So I do have a state record, but it's shared. So the rest of this, I'm going to go through a number of different species in Ohio, show you some of the field markings. When I'm done here, I'm going to have covered almost all the ones you see here, and these are the most common ones. You will have an idea of the field characters for the most common dragonflies and damselflies in the state. And I'm going to start with this one. This is probably the second most common dragonfly in the state. It's the eastern pond hawk. And what I want you to remember is white at the tip of the tail, green on the face, and then blue every place in between. Okay, that bluish color is something called pruinosti, and it's a waxy coating that's deposited on the cuticle as the individual ages. And it happens in the males here. It covers our whole body. It reflects a lot of UV light. And these are territorial and they perch. And we think this enables to see each other at greater distances. So they can help space themselves out, or at least figure out where the rivals are and who to chase and who not to chase. Because the patterns, they will chase, some of these things will chase conspecifics or any other intruder in their habitat, but others will be a little bit, you know, they won't waste their time on anything that's not their own species. So that is the eastern pond hawk. The female looks like this. She doesn't have the pruinosti. The males, when they are young, look like this. But again, you look way in the back where it's off focus, white, face is green, same species. Here's the other species. This is the blue dasher, black at the end of the abdomen and white on the face. The pruinosti also doesn't go around the side of the thorax, but when you're looking at these, you're often looking down on the back and they look like they're all blue at that point. That's the female. You know, how they figured out these things were in the same species, you know, sometimes you wonder. Of course, they mate with each other and you see them together, so you figure it out. So they're the two most common dragonflies in the state. So you know those two, they fly at the same time in the same habitats. You're constantly confusing them, and you need to learn to just phase them out, because all the really cool stuff is cruising around and you keep looking at these two and wasting your time on them. Now this is another one that gets prunos over its whole body. This is the spangled skimmer. Diagnostic character, it has bicolored stigma, okay? It's the only one in the state, probably in the nation, that has this. There's a woman down at the University of Akron for her PhD. She's working on this, and I can't wait till she gets this thing under the SEM, because those are surface-induced colors. I want to see that transition from black to white. She's done some amazing work with that. That is a young male, okay? Same species, same gender. That's the young male, no pruinosti. He's young. He's not ready to go to the pond to defend a territory. That's the female. So the female has the basic color pattern, and then the males just add on the pruinosti on top of that. And when they're good in prunos, they can go and fight out. Okay, it's like, you know, I guess with humans, once you start getting some facial hair, then you're ready to compete. Slaty skimmer, or as Jim McCormick calls it, the blueberry dragonfly. It's really cool pruinosti on it. And then we have the widow skimmer. I don't know where the widow part came from. Dark saddlebags at the base of the wings with a little bit of pruinosity on the wing outboard of those. And then on the body itself, a light dusting of pruinosity. Often tangling with the common whitetail, brilliant white, pruinosity, a little bit of white on the wings. You could play some nasty tricks on these. You get a Sharpie and you color over the white and you turn them loose, and they're flashing their species significant signal, and their rivals aren't being warned off because they're not seeing the white. This is the young male, and no pruinosity yet. Females look very similar, except their wing pattern is different. Notice the wing pattern here, the dark, still have 4 dark spots, but they're in the middle of the wing. And then here's one just developing that pruinosity. So it's like gulls, you have to learn the different plumage. This is a 4-spotted skimmer. And at one of our meetings in 23, I thought I saw these off at a good distance. I took some pictures, but you couldn't make out what it was. On the way home, I stopped at a pond in Lorain County. I got this picture and I looked at that through the viewfinder and said, oh, that's a 4-spotted skimmer. That was a lifer for me. Rarely seen in Ohio. They show up every couple of years. So I started doing some detective work. On June 14th, you notice in Wisconsin, just look at Wisconsin, they're kind of scattered out in the state all the way down to Chicago, okay? On June 15th, they're down mostly around Chicago. And if you look in that circle, it's very hard to see from your vantage point, but there is wind blowing out of the north across Wisconsin, pushing them down to the south, and then a wind hitting Chicago, blowing to the east, pushing them towards Ohio. Okay, this species is known to migrate short distances. And here is a case that migration coexisted with strong enough winds at the surface to cause them to move into Ohio. June 16th, we didn't find any in Ohio because it's raining that day. And there they are on the 17th. They popped up all over the place. They were around for about 3 or 4 weeks. They disappeared. They did not come back last year. We were hoping they're going to become established because there's so many of them, but didn't happen. When the coolest little dragonflies you can find, go down to Cedar Bog, which is actually a fen, and take a look for these. They're tiny. They're called elfin skimmers. This is the female, and she is a wasp mimic. Okay, she flies. She does a pretty good imitation of a wasp when she is flying. The male just goes crazy with the pruinosity. He doesn't do the wasp thing. They're really cool. They're flying now at Cedar Bog if you can get there. They're flying at other bogs in Ohio, but most of the other bogs you need special permission stuff to get in. Now, the meadowhawks are a tough group taxonomically, and that's where we have some confusion, but there's no ambiguity about this one. This is the blue-faced meadowhawk, okay? You can get that, right? Blue-faced meadowhawk. This is the bandwing meadowhawk, and again, the male up front, a little bit more brightly colored than the female that he has found. Another small one likes fen-like conditions. There's a little bit of a problem here. That is not a female of that species. He's made a bit of a mistake. This is not going to end well. It's kind of a Romeo-Juliet thing. That's the female of the other species. That is the eastern amberwing, another wasp mimic. And again, small. And there is the male. You can see why they're called amberwings. That's plantain it's perched on, so you can see how small these things are. We have spread wings in Ohio, family Lestidae. Dragonflies, of course, hold their wings out flat. Damselflies fold them over their back and hold them together. Lestids can't make up their mind. They hold them at a 45-degree angle. Here's a female of that species, the amberwing. She is amber spreadwing. You can see that ovipositor going to work there, making little slices. You see the other ones all lined up, nicely spaced. Each slit, she puts an egg in. If you've ever seen cicadas laying eggs, this is the exact same thing. It reminds you of it. The eggs will stay in there. At some point, either they will hatch out and the larvae will drop into the water below, or more likely that whole branch will fall down into the water and then they will hatch out and start their life in the water. This is a sad story. This is the start of the sad part of the talk. The river jewelwing, beautiful little insect. There's one population in Ohio. It is one car wreck, one pesticide spill away from being extirpated in Ohio, as best we know. And we have looked for these things elsewhere. One little spot, the entire habitat's about the size of this room. Okay, and it is slightly upstream and under a major highway bridge. That's the female there. Iridescent coloration on these. The light, their color changes as the angle of light changes. Beautiful insects. Even more spectacular is the Appalachian jewelwing. This is a big damselfly. It's bigger than a lot of the dragonflies in the state. Bright green, even metallic green on the wing veins. Absolutely incredible beast. These were found in the Mohican region in about 1898. And Dave Kellicott back there, I think he was on the crew that found those. And they clear cut the area, and they are no more in Ohio. We'll let Wendy in. Okay, so here's a moth sheet. And this was, how many of you have ever heard of Daniel Jansen? Okay. So Daniel Jansen is like one guy, it's exaggeration, but one guy who saved an entire biome. Okay, he was doing field work in Costa Rica in tropical dry forest. It was being turned into cattle pasture. He got the Costa Rican government to help start setting it aside. Now there's a huge national park down there, and he's still down there working there. He's been working there for decades. This was in 1984. His wife, Winnie Halwex, works with him. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. I've spotted him in the field at a distance. I have talked to Winnie a little bit. We were arguing about what was eating a grasshopper on the side of the road. But in any event, that's 1984. That's what biologists do, right? 1984. 2019. You guys have heard about the great insect apocalypse. This is from an article that was in The Guardian last week, and this kind of freaked me out because I know Dave Jansen, or at least his work. This guy figured out the acacia ant, acacia tree symbiosis, which is in that habitat. So he's well-known ecologist, entomologist, and they're not getting the bugs down there they used to. I've done some research down at that station. I know where these lights are, and yeah, it's not getting good. This is happening worldwide. It's happening not just in the Corn Belt. It's happening in rainforests. It's happening in a huge national forest in, they first started noticing this in Puerto Rico, and it's having second order effects. It's affecting now the lizards and the things that feed on them. This has been documented. So there's Dave Jansen and Winnie down below, and then pictures of the lights. And it's a good article, like I said, in The Guardian about a week ago. It's definitely worth reading, but not if you're depressed. The other thing that caught me was Dave Wagner. I do know Dave fairly well. And he is, he thinks that a major component of this, not the only, I mean, there are pesticides, lights, cars, all these things makes a difference. But he thinks it's the warmer temperatures combined with drought, and the insects just dry out. Okay, now that's not happening to dragonflies, but for a lot of the other insects, that's probably what's happening. And Dave's a bright guy, I think he's on to something there. And that would be kind of the overarching thing that all these other things are contributing to. Folks, this is something to worry about, and a lot of you guys, I hope you have better luck at it than we do. We've been figuring out where the problem is, but we haven't been able to figure out much what to do about it so far. There's Dave with his beating sheet, and that's actually Jim McCormick in the background, an incredible field biologist, walking along full speed, and all of a sudden he stops, caterpillar, at night. He just knows what to look for. So, the Canada darner, its name implies it's a northern species, used to be relatively common in Ohio, very hard to find anymore, haven't been found for a couple of years. Northern species, moving north probably. Timing is everything for the larvae. They have to be in the water at just the right time. By the right time, I mean not just the right water temperature and stuff, but they want to be in there so they are growing large at a time where there are no dragonfly larvae bigger than they are. So the succession of species has to be very precise. And if you mess that up, maybe the Candida darner, it lays its eggs at the wrong time, and or they don't develop fast enough because of water temperature or something like that. And some common species like the blue dasher, if they're down there, the larvae are eating all the Candida darner immatures. So we don't know what's going on. Okay, back to happy time. This is Calopteryx maculata, found in all 88 counties. Very, very common. You see them all over the place. Brilliant, again, colors that change at different angles. If you saw this one, this is the female, saw this one, different light, it might look green or it might look blue. Okay. This is the violet dancer. Again, beautiful, brilliant colors to it. Okay, I'm talking to somebody about this one today. This is the, blue-fronted dancer. And there's that powder blue and that stormtrooper line and all that. And so this is a male. And this species, they are kind of gregarious. Most males are territorial. These form what almost is a lek. They'll be in groups on stream side in the sun. Okay, there's the female. And no big fork on it there. So that's the female. And again, duller color. She doesn't want to get eaten by a bird. You want to defend the important part of the group. So again, male. He's sitting there, he's looking for a female. He catches the female, they go off to lay eggs. Notice what happens to his thorax when they're laying eggs. It goes dark. It's the same mechanism we think that the darner was doing at the first part of the talk. He does not want to be sticking up there and being bright blue for a dragonfly or something come by and snatch him. It's not unusual to find females with the body of a male, the abdomen of a male, just sticking up from the back of their neck with no body on it. Okay, so he dims his lights. Okay, while he's in this position, and she goes about laying her eggs. Now here's where it gets fun. This is also a female of that species. A small percentage of that population, the females will look like the males, presumably so that they can get down to the water without being harassed by the males. Because the male looks at them, again, they're not territorial. Oh, they're male. Come on, buddy. Let's go, bro. We've got a good spot here. She comes down, can get to the water without being harassed. At least that's what we think is going on. But it gets better. When those blue ones, the blue females, are mated with the normal blue males, her thorax turns dark as well. Okay, so this is just really cool stuff. Related species, the powder dancer, kind of the same thing. The females are dichromatic. The normal ones are kind of brown. And then there are other ones that are blue. And notice the blue one looks a lot like also the males of the other species. And they do the same color change thing. So what we have is we have what we call anadrochrome females, females that have the coloration of a male, as opposed to the normal gynochrome, gynochrome coloration of the females. Let's hope that the federal government never finds out about this. This is going to cause some, what chrome were you at birth? I'm not sure. This is going to get interesting. Nature is just a little bit messier. This is a really gorgeous little damselfly. It's among the bluets. It's called the rainbow bluet. And I realized as I put this talk together, I need to do a little bit of research and find out why they call it rainbow bluet. But in any event, this is not uncommon in Ohio. This is the common bluet. And remember I said we tried to write the keys so you didn't need to have the specimen in hand. The bluets are an exception to that. The common bluet, if you get a good picture like this one, you can see the terminalia of the male there, and you can identify it to species fairly well. I'm fairly confident with those identifications. Others you have to have in hand, if not under a scope, to tell them apart. But sometimes they also give you other clues. For instance, the skimming bluet has a little wavy blue line there on the second abdominal segment. You can also see it in that inset, but notice that the bar here is broken as opposed to solid. That's my traditional entomologist training where it was pounded in my head. You can never rely on color patterns, but actually you can a lot of times as long as you're careful not to be too caught up with them. Believe it or not, these are called orange bluets. They fly later in the day when presumably being a brighter color is useful to them. Similarly, the aptly named Vesper bluet flies around dusk. And then we have these guys. This is Ramber's forktail. And this picture was taken in Ohio on January 3rd. Okay, talk about global warming. But it was in a greenhouse where they sell aquatic plants, which they import from Florida. You can see maybe where this is going. But I was in this greenhouse and found these things really cool. We have them on our species list, but we don't know. Presumably some have gotten out. If you go down to Florida, this is what a young female of that species looks like. So when I was in that greenhouse, I was looking for the males and the females, and I could not find a female. I looked and looked. I went back on another day and looked and looked. Finally, one day I was sorting through my pictures on the computer as opposed to on the back of the camera. And I was looking at this picture and I go, oh, that's a female. Another anandrochrome, and a really good one. Although the males tend to be a little bit more greenish. This one's kind of a bluish green. Yeah, cooped up in that greenhouse, you bet the females don't want to be harassed all the time. And so that's what they've gone to. Now, the most common odonate in Ohio, this is the fragile forktail. I am positive that it's Ischnura posita because the bar on the thorax is broken and the tip of the abdomen is not blue. Okay, this is the male. The females in this group have the pruinocity, not the males, but the females. And when that pruinocity gets really well developed, it will cover over that shoulder stripe and make these almost impossible to identify. Okay, so this is the female, the most common species in the state. The second most common species in the state, and when I say most common, they're not the most observed because they're small and they're hard to see and not everybody can get a good picture of them. Okay, but I'm confident there are more of these than there are of those two dragonflies. But this is the eastern forktail. And again, you notice that solid bar now instead of a broken bar. In this case, it has blue on the tip of the abdomen. So there's that solid bar. And this one's also carrying some mites. And that'd be a whole other lecture talking about the mites. Here's the female. And you can see that pruinocity is starting to obscure that line. It's very difficult to separate the females of these two species. But that is a solid bar on that one. But they fool you sometimes. This is a male of the eastern forktail, even though it has a broken bar. It also has a blue abdomen, and the other one would not. To make matters more fun, this is the young female of the species. I swore I was never going to be like those birders that get up at 2:30 in the morning to drive God knows where to see some bird that's popped up at somebody's bird feeder. So one day on Not Ohio, I see a picture of a duckweed firetail in Ohio. In 2002, I was in West Virginia with the Dragonfly Society of the Americas. We were in a swamp. One of our guys from Ohio found one of these in that swamp. It was a state record for West Virginia. I was at least there when it was found. I didn't find it. I stood up from looking at that thing and looked across the river to Ohio. I knew that. And so we have been looking for this thing for over 20 years. It pops up at the Cincinnati Nature Center. So I drive over to Cincinnati one morning. I get out of the car, my long lens, people there, they know what I'm there for. They point me to the pond. I get to the pond. It took me about 5 minutes to find it. You would think a bright red damselfly, but tiny, would be easy to spot on green duckwood. You would be wrong. And they're really tough. I've looked at iNaturalist since then. There are 13 records on iNaturalist from Ohio. And as best I can tell, they are all of this individual. There was one male in that pond. I was there for a couple hours looking for a female, looking for other males. I saw one individual, and that's all anybody else photographed over the next, well, actually, I was towards the end of the 2-week period that he was out there. So they may be out there yet, but we have it as a state record now. It's been here. Other strange state records. Argia Alberta, the Paiute dancer, closest known population was in Oklahoma before Jim Lemon noted it one day at Cedar Bog, and they looked at some of his old pictures and realized it had been there for a couple of years. And a couple of populations now well established in Ohio, we think. But again, coming from a drier place, possibly global warming. And I'm going to finish with this guy. This is Heterina americana, the American ruby spot. Again, we're back to brilliant iridescent colors. Here the male with lots of bronze and greens and big red spots at the base of the wings. And it's a fairly sizable damselfly, common. They're out now, but they'll be more common late in the summer. They're found on jewelweed and gravel bars in larger rivers. Here's the female eating a stonefly. She tends more towards green, a little bit duller colors. And there they are in what we call wheel. Now, I'll ask you another question here. I have looked at a human heart. I mean, actual human heart. It does not look like a Valentine's heart. Does that look like a Valentine's heart? I am convinced that this is where the Valentine's heart came from. I cannot find it. I need to find somebody that knows the classics or someone can dig into the literature. I mean, these two are in love. This is obviously a symbol of love right here. Okay. Yeah. So now we also have the smoky ruby spot. I was seeing these in Ohio about 30 some years ago, but I saw one and I didn't see it for like 20 years. Actually, I saw it, one of our students caught one and we couldn't figure out what it was. Then we realized, oh, it's a smoky ruby spot. Imagine the American ruby spot held over a sooty candle flame. Okay, and you get the idea. It's basically the same thing, but it's kind of black, kind of dark. And there it is with the female. And these do microhabitat partitioning in a very interesting way. I'm doing some research on that, but they take a stream section. They would both like to be in the same place, but the Americans will crowd these guys off into a less desirable part of the river from their standpoint. And these guys will be in another spot. And that part of the river is harder to get to. So we're trying to figure out now, are these things moving into the state? Like I said, we know they've been here for over 30 years. In fact, there's records going back to the 50s and stuff, but very rare. Nowadays, once you know where to go, you can see them readily. Possibly global warming moving up into our area. So here's both of them together. The top two are the Americana, a little bit broader wings, brighter red, brighter colors overall, light at the tip of the abdomen in the males. And the Taisha is dark wing tips. In Florida, they're completely dark. In Costa Rica, the wings are completely dark. And then the tip of the abdomen is dark as well. So that's what I've got. And this is where we do need some audio. Let's see here. It's a friend of mine. He was holding that up for people to see. So, oh, geez, did go a little bit over, but these are the ones I actually cut for time, and they're just going to play in the background. If you guys have any questions, we got time. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the question is, how do they regulate their body temperature? Well, for the nymphs, aquatic, aquatic, they really can't. Now they may set themselves up in the warmer parts of a pond or something, but that's about the best they can do. The adults will, like I said, with the The darner, they will orient to the sun, bask in the sun and warm up. When it gets too hot, they will do what we call obelisking, where they stand on their, kind of like on their tiptoes, and they point their tail at the sun, just like a sundial. And that minimizes the surface area. And these are for the ones that are territorial and need to stay out in the sun. Otherwise, they'll just go into the shade. So there are some that will fly down into the water occasionally, and we're still not sure what that is. Are they literally testing the water to see if there are predators in there, or are they trying to knock off mites, or are they trying to cool down? Nobody really knows why. Yeah. Yeah.
So do the mites like kill them, or they just use it for transport?
It's fairly certain, given where they attach, that they're trying to get some body fluids out of them, because they're attaching at joints and stuff like that. But you can have them that are really severely infested, and they don't really seem to mind. Now, what it's doing to their egg production or whatever, I don't know. But it seems to be how the mites get from one body of water to another. Like foresty, but they also, there's no doubt they're sucking stuff out. Yeah.
When they're changing color, is that like kind of UV regulated, or is it purely heat?
It seems to be temperature, at least in the ones I've looked at. And the mechanism seems to be they have these, I forget what the technical term for them, but these little color sacs under the skin. And when they're close to the skin, again, it's not a dye, but they have a micro sculpturing to them that refracts light, because it's kind of like a sky blue, right? Same basic principle as blue sky. But they can pull those away from the surface. And when they pull those away from the surface, then it goes dark. And so that's how they're doing it. And I believe that's intracellular, that they're pulling it away from the surface, not a muscle pulling a layer of tissue away, but just at very close distance. Yeah.
Great talk. My question is, with H2 Ohio building these wetlands, are there pioneering species that come first, or typically, I guess, what families of those?
Yeah, there's a group like this one here, and well, this is a great example. These guys follow storm systems, and they lay their eggs in rain pools, and their eggs can develop to adults in about 3 weeks. And so in Africa, in Asia, these things have been found hundreds of miles out at sea. They migrate between India and Africa. They migrate across North America. They're just constantly on the move. They have really big hind wings to fly. And so they are really good at getting to spots and colonizing it very quickly, probably feeding on, whatever crustaceans come out of the mud. But for the wetlands that they're restoring, yeah, it tends to be the first ones that come in are, again, the ones that feed on little crustaceans and that, but almost immediately other species that will feed on tadpoles. Constructed wetlands can have tadpoles after the first spring. And of course, if you stock it with little fish and stuff, so as soon as that stuff gets in there, almost immediately, there's a number of species that get in. We have some rare species, but they tend to be associated with rare habitats more than anything else. It's not that they come in late to these, but they require like bog habitats, or they require something else, or a lot of river species obviously won't be there. But one thing I can tell you, if you guys ever in a situation where you have any kind of jurisdiction over a pond, the last thing we need in Ohio is a pond with bluegills and bass in it. We have enough of those. We've got it covered. Neither of those are going extinct. If you have a pond and you can keep it fish-free, amphibians, dragonflies, crustaceans, birds, they will all thank you for it, because it's going to be a more diverse habitat.
Can dragonflies handle radio transmitters that would be used by Motus towers?
I don't know about the Motus towers, but they are starting to mount them on the dragonflies, and there are a couple of people doing that research. They've been tagging the Anax junius. A number of the other Aeshnids do migrate like that. They've been tagging them with like the B tag things, but the recapture rate is horrible. But they have been recapturing, we know, and you could track them on radar. I don't know if you know about the bird migration through Mexico around Veracruz. or it's in Veracruz, in the Narrows there, where the hawks fly through that one little corridor. A number of years ago, somebody took a closer look and they realized the dragonflies were migrating through there. The hawks are catching them on the wing. And so they think that the hawk migration evolved to follow dragonfly migration through that little corridor there. So yeah, there's a lot to be learned with that stuff, but they are starting the smaller tanks. But the one problem is people do dragonfly research, never have any money. So it's not like, you're, Sandhill Cranes or somewhere you could, get planes to fly alongside them. You're just kind of stuck with what you could scratch. Yeah, we can afford a net, some little envelopes to put them in, take some pictures of them, but yeah, real money for research,
Well, let's thank Dr. Shasta. Thank you very much, Dave. I've got we can stick around and chit chat a little bit, but we gotta get Dave and his wife Ann back to the lighthouse where we'll be staying today, so. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you next Thursday.
Enjoy your summer here. This is the best summer of your life right now.
And handouts and reading for Saturday.
Hello, I have your book and I also have a couple of questions. Sure. Yeah, okay, so I noticed the nymphs have like almost decorative looking features, and I was wondering that like don't necessarily always appear on the adults. And